If you're looking for something completely unadulterated, this really is the nth level of rawness and what makes a guy who likes sports cars tick. For that reason, I think it's a very, very special car. The rarity of it, the design elements, who designed it. Tom Walkinshaw basically took Jaguar to great heights in endurance racing. First with the XJR-15 and the subsequent wins at Daytona as well. And he started out racing XJS. Being a Jaguar fan and watching them win Le Mans, the idea of having something that raw to drive on the road. But when the opportunity came up to get one, I had to have it. My name is Jasbir Dhillon. Friends call me Jazz. And I drive a 1991 Jaguar XJR-15, chassis number 50, out of 53 cars that were made. It's one of 27 road versions. The remainder of the cars were track versions only. This is one of the last road cars that they ever made. It starts from the moment you get in the car. It's not easy. You have to kind of step on the seat, lower yourself down. It's a little bit of a contortionist act. It sort of gives you that anticipation that this effort is going to be worth it. Stay tuned. It comes standard with a set of headphones. It's an intercom system. That sounds a little bit gimmicky, you know, do you really need it? You're sitting right next to somebody. You know, I've driven with my son a few times, and if we don't have the headphones on, I can't hear my own voice, and I certainly can't hear his voice. It's that loud in there, you know, which makes it just perfect. You know. And then just going on to the start sequence of how you fire up the car. You know, there's a master battery switch, and then you go through a sequence of switches and you flick a starter button, it fires up. And immediately you're enveloped in sound and vibrations from the engine that's bolted right behind you. Rev matching properly, downshifting, heel towing, and doing that stuff, it never gets old. Every time you take it out, you're getting more and more familiar with it. It's getting to know you as much as you're getting to know it. You can feel your comfort level evolving with it. In the early 80s, there were two main efforts for racing for Jaguar. Tom Walkinshaw was quite successful in Europe, most notably with the XJR-9, which won Le Mans outright in 1988. Out of that successful racing effort, Tom decided to build a Jaguar supercar. They took the existing XJR-9 tub and modified it very slightly. Basically an all carbon fiber body on a carbon fiber chassis, which was a first. It only weighs about 1,050 kilograms. So while 500 horsepower doesn't seem like much, earliest numbers that were quoted was a 0 to 60 time in about 3.3 seconds. And depending on the top end gearing, it would do up to 200 miles plus. When I was growing up, this car first sort of started to make the rounds in some magazines. And so naturally the bodywork and the design just caught my eye. It was just beautiful to look at. And as someone that was born in England, grown up in England, it sort of struck close to home. Years later, the opportunity came up to acquire one. I'd been looking for one, and I mentioned to him that I've got a couple of boxes and would he be interested in a trade? And he said, you know, I used to own a car boxer in England years ago. This car that I have here has still got a British license plate on it. And he said, really? He said, what's the license number? And I read it off. It was the car that he owned for 10 years. Just an amazing coincidence. And I actually bought that car locally here in Nashville. So it's just unbelievable that that came to pass that way. Peter Stevens penned this car in 88, 89. You look at the cars that he's been involved in, how this man hasn't been knighted at this point in time. It's a bit of a travesty. So if anybody's out there listening, here's my plug for Sir Peter Stevens, let's put it that way. Interestingly, after he finished at TWR and he had penned the XJR-15, his next project was at McLaren. And so there's some design elements of the McLaren F1 in this car. It's got a very sort of cab-forward design, and that's based on the fact that they're using a racing tub and putting the skin around it. It's not exactly center steering wheel, but it's right center, so you get excellent forward visibility. But beyond that, the biggest attribute of this car is it cuts through the air. It's very, very lithe. If you look at all the shut lines on the car and the windows, there's very, very little wind resistance there. It was one of the first cars that was ever all carbon fiber. And then they mated the 6-liter V12, normally aspirated, directly to the tub. There's no insulation between the engine and the cockpit, and there's no insulation really from radiators up front. So if it wasn't for the air conditioning, it would be a pretty uncomfortable place to be. My wife asked me once, she goes, "What's it like to drive?" I said, you know, it's noisy, it's hot, it vibrates in there, you can smell all of the different exotic stuff behind you that's being combusted. In other words, it's absolutely perfect. I absolutely love it, you know. I don't think it's something that we would go out to dinner in, but in terms of the thrill the car gives you to drive, in terms of the rawness, you can drive the car for 30 minutes and you come back. Every one of your senses has been checked. Whether it's the smell, it's the sound. The only word I can really describe for this car is visceral. And it's one of those few cars that I've ever had where after you've driven it, you're sort of still coming down for about 30 minutes after the fact. And for me, that's always been the mark of a fantastic car, you know, so it definitely checks all of those boxes. This car has a real emotional attachment because Dad was a self-made guy. Arrived in England in the 60s, started with nothing, no formal education, just an incredible work ethic and incredible zeal for life. It's a reminder of Dad's passion and also his influence on my life. Thrill I think that we've had of having a passion for this hobby is the friends that we've made, more so than anything else, the relationships. Certainly the times that I've had with my kids driving it, seeing their reaction. My son always says that because of the headphones alone we can never sell the car, so I'm locked in there. You know, this passion has taken us all over the world, and we've never met someone disagreeable that's involved or has a passion for cars. And it always comes down to the same thing. It's the personal interactions you have with people. The thing that you always take away is the people that you meet as a result and the relationships that you make, really lifelong friendships. It transcends all boundaries, races, borders, countries. The passion is truly global.